Alright guys, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Rouda, and I'm going to be talking about stepping up to technical leadership. How many people in here have a leadership role of some sort? You can't hear me?
How about that? Is that better? I'm not used to using one of these. I can't walk around as much. That's alright. Anyway, my name is Rouda. We're going to be talking about stepping up into technical leadership. How many people in here have a leadership role of some sort? Everybody, almost. Well, that's good, because even if you're not in a leadership role, you can still be a leader, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. We're going to give you some tips and tricks on how to become a good leader and a better leader, and some things that I've learned over the years being a leader. Right now, I'm an IT manager. I manage the web and mobile team at Comporium. We're an ISP cable company in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I also teach at Winthrop University and at York Technical College, and I've been teaching for about 10 years. So I've got a little bit of experience when it comes to leadership, and I'm going to kind of go into that. Well, I've got what I think leadership is, but I wanted to do a little research before I started this, so I went to my most trusted advisor, which is Google, and asked them what is a leader, and it came up with two things. And number one, it said a person who leads or commands a group, organization, or country. And that just sounds kind of powerful, like you're commanding a country. And that seemed a little too big for IT. So I looked at the next one, and the next one said the principal player in a music group. So I thought lead guitar, something like that. And that's a little bit closer to us. But that didn't give me what I was looking for. So I decided to go to my next most trusted advisor in person, and that's my 3-year-old. So I asked her, what is a leader? And she said, it's the person in the front of the line. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I started thinking about that, and when you really look at it, what does the person in the front of the line do when you're in kindergarten? Or, you follow them, right? They go, and you follow them. You do what they do. If they're in line for the water fountain, you follow them and you get water. And that's kind of what a leader is, right? Somebody that you follow. It's somebody that you want to be like and do things like. And whenever you get the opportunity as a 3-year-old to be the line leader, that's like a big deal. And it really is. And in IT, to be the leader, to lead a group and lead a team is a big deal. And we need to treat it like that. So I wasn't necessarily 100% convinced that she knew what a leader was, although it did make a whole lot of sense. I decided to go to one more source, Wikipedia. And I kind of found the same thing in Wikipedia. It said, for example, some understand a leader simply as someone who people follow. So then I thought back about my daughter, and she said that, let's see if I can hold this. She said that, a leader is the person in the front of the line is somebody that you follow, and Wikipedia agrees. It is someone that you follow. So what I wanted to do is kind of explore a little bit about why you would follow someone, and what are some things that you can do to help people to follow you. But while I was still doing my web searching, I found a couple of pictures that I thought were pretty good and interesting. And this first one is the difference between a leader and a boss, and a leader and a manager. And you see the picture at the top, it's got the guy on top kind of saying go, and he's telling his people to go, and they're pulling him along with it. And that's more what a boss would do, not necessarily what a leader should do. And the bottom picture shows that a leader is kind of in the front, and it's the one pulling. It's in front of the line, just like my daughter said they should be. And it's saying, let's go, instead of just go. And I think that's kind of an important distinguishing thing between a leader and a boss. But then I found one more picture that's very similar that was more our speed. And it shows the IT leader, which is down here. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a rocket underneath that business. And they're going rather fast, and that's what we do in IT. We move very fast. All right, so next up I want to compare a little bit about the leader versus the boss thing. And what I have here is I have 2 columns, and one column shows what a leader would do and a leader would say. And the next one is what a boss would do. So what we just talked about is that a boss will say go, whereas a leader is more like let's go, and brings you to more of that team feel. Also, the boss is going to instill fear. It'll create fear. You're afraid to mess up in front of your boss. You're afraid to challenge your boss. But in a good leader, you have some confidence. You feel like your leader created confidence, and it's okay for you to tell your leader that, hey, I disagree with this, as long as you have a good reason for it. And that's what a good leader will do. They'll instill confidence within their people. Leaders know how I mean, a boss knows how. And when you look at that, that's kind of like the idea that you don't want to tell people all your little secrets and everything that you do, because you have a fear that they may, take your role. If everybody knows how to do what I'm doing, then I'm expendable. And that's kind of the mindset of a boss. Whereas a true leader has the mindset of, let me show you how so that you can do my job someday. We try to grow people. That's our job as a leader, is to grow people. And if you're not growing people, then you're not being a very good leader. So what we're doing is we're trying to show people that this is my job, you can do this, let me empower you to take this challenge so that you can do it, and then I can move up. I can't move up as a leader without someone taking my spot. All right, bosses rely on authority. They have a title, and that title is what gives them the ability to direct people and to influence people. A leader doesn't need a title. They're going to rely on cooperation to inspire people. A boss will take credit for things. They'll say, look what we did, look what I did, look what I accomplished. Whereas a leader will give credit. They'll look at their team and say, look what Lynn did, look what Wes did, look what Tyler did. All right, they're going to be pointing out people that contributed to the project, not necessarily saying that they did it, but giving credit. A boss knows everything, they're never wrong. And a leader's going to admit mistakes. They're going to admit that they don't know the answer to questions. A lot of times when someone comes up to you and you're in a leadership role and they ask you something, if you don't know the answer, it's best to say, I don't know the answer. I rely on the experts, the people that do know the answer. Don't just make up something. Some more traits of a good leader. Leaders are purpose-driven. That means they have a reason for doing what they're doing. They have a purpose behind all their actions. They're not wasting time doing things just because that's the way they've always been, and that's just the way you do it. You think about all the things that you do, and you see what's the purpose behind this, and go towards that purpose. They're positive, and by that I mean that they have a positive outlook on things. Nobody wants to follow someone who's always negative, who's always saying, this sucks. You want somebody that says, hey, look what you can do, look what you can get out of this. They're respectful, they're not going to condemn people, they're not going to kick people when they're down. When someone messes up, one of the worst things that you can do as a leader is to put them down even further. In our roles, people mess up, people make mistakes. They, delete a repository, something like that. When that happens, you don't just beat them down. They know they did something bad, and they feel bad about it. You figure out, how can we fix this? How can we get back to where we were before? Encourage them, lift them up. One of the best stories that I've ever heard about this was the CEO of IBM had one of his employees that just cost the company $500,000. So he set up a one-on-one meeting to talk about it. The guy comes in and sits down, and after about 2 or 3 seconds of silence, he said, so, I guess I'm fired, huh? The CEO says, why would I fire you? I just spent $500,000 training you. So you don't want to, a good leader is not going to, kick someone when they're down. They're going to be encouraging and uplifting. They're also going to be a good communicator. They're going to communicate. And that's the biggest challenge for me as leader, is communication. Which is kind of ironic because I work at a communications company. But it really is difficult to communicate with people because we all have different backgrounds, we have different histories, different perspectives. And to be a good communicator, you've got to look at things from someone else's perspective and try to get them to understand where you're coming from as well as you understand where they're coming from. So I think that's really difficult. Some more traits of a leader and what a leader does. A leader is world-class. They're going to be, or at least try to be, the best in their field. And the reason why is because who wants to follow someone that's not the best? And if you want to inspire people, you've got to at least try to be the best. Show that you're giving the best effort that you have. Anybody remember those Gatorade commercials back in the 90s when Michael Jordan was still playing? Be like Mike. If Michael Jordan set the bench, would anybody want to be like Mike? No, they wanted to be like Mike because he was the best in the field. He was the best out there. So if you want to be a leader and inspire people by your actions, then try your best. People know, whether you're trying or not. Even if you are good and you don't have to try, you should still try. Leaders take personal responsibility. That's one of the things that I've seen some of the leaders on my team do. Whenever something messes up, they take responsibility. Sometimes even if it's not their fault. They'll step up and say, hey, that's my bad. I should have caught that beforehand. I know he put it in, but he didn't have the experience. I should have saw that. I should have did a code review. I should have checked that out. And that's what a good leader is going to do, is they're going to take responsibility. If anybody on my team messes up, it's not my team's fault. It's my fault. I should have coached them better. They should have had more going into it. And that's what a leader has to do, is take responsibility. Whether they knew about the action or not, it was their responsibility. This is one that I struggle with because I'm not a very enthusiastic person. But leaders need to be enthusiastic about the big picture. And the reason why is because a lot of studies show that if someone's working on a small element or a small part, and all they know about is that small piece, they're not going to give it as much heart, as much effort as if they know about the big picture. If you're only working on one example at work, we put together this little pop-up that pops up and asks people if they want to go paperless on their bill. It seems silly. But if you're just working on the part that makes the pop-up, you don't know the result, you don't know the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish with that, it doesn't mean as much to you. You're not going to put as much into it. So one thing that a leader needs to do is be enthusiastic about that small piece that your team member plays and let them know how it fits into the big picture and what's important about it. Leaders need to be about relationships. And one of the trends is for people to work remotely and do more work remotely, and I'm all for that. But I do find it's a lot more challenging to build relationships when you're remote. And that's one thing we're going to have to do as leaders, is to work harder on that, work harder to build that relationship. It is important to know when someone's having a bad day, so you can know how to talk to them. You don't want to be the person that tips them over the edge and they go postal on you. You want to make sure that you help people out and you understand the relationships that are involved that go to play. None of us, no matter how good we are, can actually check what's going on at home when we come into the door to work. Some of that's going to spill over. The same thing when we go home. It's going to spill over. So if you know about your team, you know about, and you build some relationships with your team, you'll go a long ways as a leader. Leaders don't make excuses. They use the difficult times to shine. So when you're a leader and things go wrong, don't make excuses. See it as an opportunity. This is one of my favorite pictures. That's on there. Give the extra 1%. This is a quote right here from Chris Carmichael. He's the coach of Lance Armstrong back when Lance Armstrong won all the Tour de France's, before the doping thing came out. But it says the last 1% most people keep in reserve is the extra 1% that champions have the courage to burn. And what this means is that as a leader, you need to give that extra 1%. When people are staying late, stay a little bit later. When people are working hard, work a little bit harder. That shows your team that you are the leader. You're the one out front, and you're pulling just as hard as they are. And it's really important to do that because no one wants to work for someone that's not going to work too. They want to work for someone that is going to work, that inspires them. One story that I didn't really prepare, but I'm going to try to wing it. From the Wright brothers. When the Wright brothers were building their first airplane, they didn't have the funds to pay people to help them. But they worked really hard, and people helped them. Although they had competition that were getting paid handily that didn't work as hard. And it was because the Wright brothers were there, and they were willing to go out and fly this plane that didn't really fly, and crash it several times, and get hurt in the process, because they were willing to work and their team was behind them, and brought like 5 or 6 sets of parts out every time, just to make sure that they had more attempts so they could reach their goal. Oh, this is a fun one. Leaders get to break the rules. Basically, leaders know when to break the rules. They understand that there is a time that you don't always play by the rules. One of the things that we do at work is we have this request for change process. So like if we have some new code going in, we submit what we call an RFC, a request for change, and that's going to get approved by the manager and then go into a change review board that's going to get approved before it goes into production. Well, if something's broken, we're not going to go through that process. We're going to break those rules, and we're going to go ahead and push that out to fix it, because that's what we need to do. When things are bad and systems are down, don't wait for an RFC to get approved before you reboot a server if you need to, or before you push up some new code or update a config file. Get it fixed, and then we'll deal with the cleanup afterwards. And that's one thing that a leader has to be able to do, is to know when to make that call. You can't always make that call. You can't say, oh, well, the color should have been red and it's green, let's reboot the server and try. No, you got to know when to do that. And that's what a leader has to do, is to keep their hand on the pulse and know when that needs to happen. Another thing a leader needs to do, we talked about cooperation a little bit, but they need to be able to cooperate with people. And please understand that cooperation does not mean that you agree with people. You don't have to agree with them to cooperate. All right? Leaders don't get rolled over. They don't just agree with everything people say, but they do need to cooperate. They need to see things from people's perspective and be able to communicate their viewpoints, through those people's perspective. So why is all this important? Does anybody understand why leadership is important? Anybody heard of Simon Sinek before? No, I highly recommend you guys go to TED and search for Simon Sinek. He's done 2 TED Talks that are just fantastic. But his latest book, I'm almost finished reading it. It's called Leaders Eat Last. And in that book, he talks about a study that was done about employee engagement. And you may know what employee engagement is? Yeah, well, when an employee is engaged, they're willing to work for the company more than just for a paycheck. They work because they care. And when an employee is disengaged, it's more like they're just there to be there. They're taking up space. They're not really giving their all. They're probably working at 50 to 60% capacity, more interested in what's on Twitter than what's going on at work. But the study found that when bosses completely ignore us, 40% of us are actively disengaged at work. And by actively disengaged, it doesn't mean that we just got distracted. It means that we're looking for things to do to keep us from doing our work. So by ignoring our people, we are causing 40% of them to be actively disengaged. And that's pretty important because that's a big number. Imagine if you could gain 40% of productivity back just like that. You can do that by paying attention. The next thing they found was that if a boss criticizes us regularly, 22% of us are actively disengaged. That's better than being ignored. So just, if you ignore your people right now, you can just start criticizing them, and that'll make some improvement. So if our bosses just criticize us, then 20% of us are actively disengaged. That's still not great, though. But the study found that if our bosses recognize just one quality, just one strength, just one thing that we do well, and reward us for it, and by reward, that's not like compensate, that just means, hey, good job, pat on the back, write a thank you card, do something that lets us know that we're making an impact. If they just reward us for one thing that we're doing, then only 1% of us are actively disengaged. And that's kind of where we want to be. That's the goal that we're looking for. And that's not done, based on, buying the new tools for people and getting them the best software. It's just by communicating, building that relationship. And that's what leaders need to do, is build that relationship. All right, the next thing that I found that was really important and really, really interesting in the Leaders Eat Last book was that it's for our health. That people that don't feel recognized at work are more likely to suffer from heart disease. And the biology behind this is pretty interesting, is that cortisol is released when you're stressed into your body. And cortisol helps, it hinders your immune system, and it's built from Mother Nature so that when we were back in hunters and gatherers and we were in tribes, cortisol would be released to heighten our senses. Because it was a threat that there's danger around. So it increased your stress level. And they found that when cortisol is present for a prolonged period of time, it leads to heart disease and reduces your immune system. And the studies found that not being recognized increases stress and increases the cortisol in your body, which I found was just very fascinating. And also the studies from Boston University found that it's bad for your home life. They did a couple of different studies, and they found that working late, before I get into this, one of the things that they did is they took employees that work 6-hour days and employees that work 10-hour days. And they measured their happiness at work with several different studies, and they took hundreds of different people. And they found that the folks that were happiest at work, whether they worked 10 hours or 6 hours, had a more positive home life than the ones that were not happy at work, which kind of makes sense. But the quote from Simon Sinek, I think, really hits home, that working late doesn't negatively affect our children, but rather how we feel at work does. If you don't like your work, for your kids' sake, don't go home. What they did is they studied the cortisol levels and the stress levels in the children at home, and they found that those were elevated as well. And partly because, if you have a bad day at work, you can't check that at work. You come home and, you let your kids have it. Whether you want to or not, you get frustrated easier. And one of the really good books called Switch, it's about change management. They talk about some of the studies that were done where they had volunteers come in and they had a plate of cookies, really warm, moist chocolate chip cookies that just smelled so good, it made you want to eat them. And this was right before lunch. And then they had another plate over here with avocados, just sitting there. And they said, okay, you can have either the cookies or the avocados. So most of the people went to the cookies. And they brought the next group in and said, oh, you smell those cookies? You can have avocados. And that's it, you can't have any cookies. So they would eat that. They kept smelling the cookies and wanting the cookies. And then at the end of that, they said, okay, we'll take this paper, the study's over, and go down the hallway and they'll check you out. Well, they didn't know that the study really wasn't over. The person at the end of the hallway that was supposed to take their paper was on the phone, pretending to be on the phone. And they were trying to see how long it took that person to get annoyed with the fact that the person was on the phone and not listening. The ones that had the choice of cookies or avocados and got what they wanted, they waited longer and they were more patient. But the ones that didn't have a choice, they didn't wait very long. They were very irritated. They wanted to get that paper and get out of there. So they found that patience is like a muscle and it gets exhausted. So when you're at work and you're stressed, you don't have patience. You're going to take that home whether you like it or not. All right, so who can be a leader? Well, like I said at the beginning, anybody can be a leader, whether you have a title or not. And I think this quote is really good. It says, there are only two ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. And what we talked about at the beginning was that bosses, use their authority to manipulate, whereas good leaders will inspire behavior. And I've seen, where I work and in other places where certain people with a title aren't necessarily good leaders. They're not inspiring anybody. But your coworkers that are your peers can be really good leaders and they can inspire you. So one of the things that a leader needs to do is to be able to not only lead to people that are below them in the org chart, but also lead to the people above them and the people on the same plane as them. In order to be a good leader, you really need to know why you do what you do. Everybody that has a job knows what they do, right? If you're an accountant, you know that you're an accountant. If you're a .NET developer, you know you're a .NET developer. If you're in QA, you know that you're in QA. Most people know how to do their job. Not everybody. Some of us are really good at faking it. But most people know how to do their job. And maybe if you move to a new company and you don't know all the procedures, you might not know exactly what you're doing. But for the most part, most of us know how to do our job. But true leaders know why they do their job. And if you just say for a profit, you're wrong. To make money is just a side. It's kind of the result. But there's something deeper that you do your job for, whether it's for respect, whether it's to benefit people, to give back. There's another reason why. And it's important to figure out what that why is. And one of the reasons why is because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. At our company, we have a very short and simple mission statement that everybody in the company knows. It's called Making Life Easier. So whenever we get to a decision that we don't know, that's a challenging decision, maybe we're building a new user interface for our online bill pay or something like that, when we look at it, we have two different choices. It's a really easy choice for us to know which one to choose. We choose the one that's easiest, that makes life easier for the customer. Because we know why we do what we do. In that book I've been referring to a lot, as Leaders Eat Last, because I'm still reading it, he talks a lot about the biology of leadership. And this slide is not my best slide by any stretch of the imagination. I read this article on TED Talks about how to give good presentations, and it said your PowerPoint should only have 1 or 2 lines, and it shouldn't have very many words. And I totally did not follow that in this slide, but that's okay. What it talks about is that there's chemicals released whenever there's individual achievement. Whenever you do something that's good for you, you release endorphins and dopamine. Anybody here runners? Anybody run? Okay, there's a few runners. Okay, I run a little bit, and when you run, you're exhausting muscles. Your muscle fibers are tearing. You're causing stress, and that's actually painful. But your body releases endorphins that mask that pain, so you don't really feel it. And then your body also releases dopamine whenever you achieve something. Maybe it's your first mile. You start feeling better. Because I know, like for me, that first quarter of a mile is like the hardest part. And that's before the endorphins and the dopamine gets released into my system. And then when they come out, I I start feeling good, get that runner's high. And these chemicals are addictive. They're the same things that come out when you smoke crack, or do heroin or something like that. So they are addictive. And there's some similar chemicals that are more social chemicals. And serotonin is one that whenever you do something nice for someone, those are released, or whenever somebody does something nice for you, that's released. So what we found is that with leadership, you can enable teams by giving that extra 1%, by doing things for them, and by causing personal achievement and group achievement, celebrating your wins, celebrating your time along the way, that will release the serotonin and the dopamine and endorphins and cause an addiction to productivity, an addiction to success. And that's kind of one of the things that we found that leaders do unknowingly. So, to get into leadership, one of the things that I'm not a natural born leader at all. I have to focus on trying to lead. I actually set time on my calendar to do things that are leadership oriented. I have a certain block every Monday, Wednesday, Friday where I'm supposed to go around and talk to people just to help build that relationship. Otherwise, I just won't do it because I'm naturally not against it. I'm not built that way. I'm kind of afraid. So I wanted to talk a little bit about being afraid to lead, having fear to step out and do something. And the way I deal with fear is I always think, what is the worst thing that can happen? And I got this from Timothy Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. Anybody read that book? That's a pretty funny book. But he talks about how, before he started letting go of some of this tasks and automating things, he wanted to go through what the worst case scenario was for doing this stuff. So he played out his worst fears. And I did the same thing before this conference. I came in here saying, what if I don't have connectors? What if there's no internet? What if I drop my laptop and it breaks and I don't have a backup? What would I do? What if, I go through all that, and then I think about it. It's like, nobody here really knows me except for a couple of my work, and, I could just sneak out, and nobody would know, and it wouldn't really matter. So I played it out, and it's not that bad. Okay, so the worst case scenario is really not that bad. I can always recover from it. And the same thing with leadership. If you're in a meeting and you need to stick up and say something, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, people think you're stupid. Well, they probably think that anyway. All right, and if they don't, it's not that hard. They're going to forget about it by the time lunch comes around because nothing you say is more important than lunch. So it's not that big of a deal. And true leaders that care and care about their people will overcome their fears. So don't be afraid to step up and lead. If you do want to be a leader, you've got to train. You've got to work hard at it. It's not something you can just try. Anybody here ever ran a marathon? Yeah, you can't just go out and try to run a marathon, right? You have to train for it. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy. And being a leader does the same thing. You have to train for it. And there's a difference between reading leadership books and training. Reading is education. There's a big difference between education and training. Do you want your kids to go through sex education or sex training? Your kids probably want something different than you do, but in order to truly learn and understand it, you have to go through training, right? That's the way it is with leadership. We have to go through leadership training. So you have to practice. You can't just read books. Most HR companies have leadership training, but it's not really training. It's more, leadership education. Until you go out and practice it, until you go out and build the relationships, you talk to your team, until you try to inspire someone, until you try to influence people. Until you actually do that, take that step, you're not really being a leader. And it takes time. It really does. One of my favorite stories about things that take time is Picasso. You guys heard of Picasso before? He drew stuff, I think, painter. But later in his life, he was pretty famous. People knew who Picasso was, before he died. He didn't just die and then become famous. So he had a drinking problem too. So he went to bars a lot, and he would drink. And a lot of times before he left the bar, he would just doodle something and give it to the bartender as his fee, because the bartender knew that he could sell what Picasso just drew on a napkin from what the bar tab was, so that was okay. But he was leaving one of these bars one time, and this lady stopped him and she said, "Oh, Picasso, I'm such a huge fan of your work." He's like, "Thanks, appreciate it." And she's like, "Oh, can you please just draw me something?" And she gave him a pad and a pen. So he spent 30 seconds and drew a little picture and signed his name. He ripped it off, he handed her the pad, and he handed her the pen. And then he held the paper out and says, "That'll be $1 million. She said, "Picasso, it took you 30 seconds. And he said, "No, ma'am. It took me 30 years to learn to do that in 30 seconds. And that's the way leadership is. It's something that takes time for you to build, and it takes time for you to get to that point to where you can actually lead on the fly. You can't just go out one day and lead. You have to train and build to it and figure it out. So while you're learning how to become a good leader, you need to understand that it's a process and it's not a project. We are all developers or work for companies doing development or lead development, and we're focused on projects. We have a start and an end to our projects. And leadership's not like that. There is no end game. The end is a mirage. You're never going to get there. You're just going to get better and better, get further and further along the journey. So don't get frustrated with it. Just understand that it's not necessarily a project with an end. It's a process that you have to go through. All right, so now we're getting into a little bit more practical things and things that you can actually take home and actually do to improve your leadership skills. Number one is communication. So you really need to focus on your communication, make sure that people understand what you said and meant to say. I don't know why I like that slide. I like this one too. I said throw a cartoon in there every now and then. So part of being a good communicator is to manage your expectations. We'll skip through that. All right, so some things you can do today. This is one of the things that I got out of the leadership training event that I went to. It's called the same-day summary. And I don't do this all the time, but I do this when it's necessary. And there's a couple of other groups that I meet with on a regular basis who I usually leave the meeting feeling like, oh, we're on the same page and we totally understand. And then the next day or a couple of days down the road, I'll get an email from that person, and it's completely opposite of what we talked about in the meeting. And if that happens to any of you guys, the thing that I would recommend is a same-day summary. Same-day summary is very short to the point. And I have little templates that I use, but basically I just put the who, what, when, where, and why into nice little bulleted lists and things like, we met at this time with these people, and Brian's going to go to legal about this piece, somebody's going to go do this, Lynn's going to take care of this, and we're going to, start scoping the project on this date. Very simple, short, to the point, one line, not even writing complete sentences, just bullets. All right, and then I email that out before the end of that day. So if I meet from 4 to 5, then I may have to stay a little bit later and write up my same day summary. That's fine. But get it done before the end of the day, because if you're anything like me, by the time you go to sleep, your memory is wiped. It's like Men in Black had the little flashy thing right there at your bed, right as you wake up. So make sure you do your same day summaries the same day. It's very helpful. It saved me a lot of times. You've heard of CYA about emailing stuff and having good minutes. This is a nice and simple way. They used to take like 5 minutes to do, but it's very, very useful. The next thing is emails. I think people struggle with emails, and I came up with 2 things that I call the rules of 4 that I think everybody should do. Is you should keep emails short and to the point. If your emails are longer than 4 sentences, shorten them. Figure out a way to do that. All right. One of the things that I found, and I've done some tests with people at work, is I would write long emails, and in the middle of it, I would just put a sentence that made absolutely no sense and didn't pertain to anything at all to the email. And see how many people catch it, and rarely does anybody ever comment on it or see it. And what I found is most people are like me, and if they see the email has paragraphs in there, they may read the first paragraph and delete it, or they may just delete it right off the bat. So keep your email short. If it does require more than 4 sentences for some reason, maybe you should call the person. Have a conversation. The next thing is 4 transactions. If an email conversation goes back and forth more than 4 times, my rule of thumb is to get up and talk to the person, or call the person, or IM the person. Do something, because email's not getting it done. If you go back and forth, like if I get an email that says, and I say, hey, did this deployment go? And I get back, no. And then I write back, why? And I get back, because. Well, that's not working. Okay, we got to go talk about this. So 4 transactions is kind of my limit. At that point, I just stop the email because we're not getting anywhere. Use bullets and short thoughts, no paragraphs. That's one of the things that I think is pretty important. If you write things out, people get confused. And if you keep it short to the point, there's less interpretation that goes on. That's one of the biggest things that people do with emails. They misinterpret the email. They read it in a different tone. Maybe they read it smiling. Maybe they read it because they're mad and they think that you were yelling at them. I don't know. Who knows? But they misinterpret it. And the last thing is to use if and else logic in your emails. Instead of, let's go back to that same example that I just said, did the deployment go? No. What I could have said is, did the deployment go? If yes, great. If no, tell me why and when it's planning on being released. and then I can get one email back with the answer and be done with it. All right. So I'm telling them what I want out of the email, making it clear. All right, back to communication. One of the other things that you need to do as a leader, whether you're a boss or not, is to have the tough conversations. And these 3 points I stole from Ash Beckham during her TED Talk. She came out of the closet and was talking about how she told her family that she was coming out of the closet. And during her talk, she made 3 different points that I thought were absolutely fantastic, and they apply completely to being a leader at work. Number 1, she said, was be authentic. Be real with the person you're having the tough conversation with. Maybe someone's coded and cutting it. Maybe, they're not, showing up to work. Maybe you just need to have that tough conversation with them. Well, be real with them. Don't be fake. Don't be like the guy in Office Space. Just be real with them. All right. Next was be direct. Just say it. It's going to be awkward. Yeah. Just get it over with. They know why why they're in your office. Don't beat around the bush. Don't make it, linger on. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Be direct. Just get it out there. All right. And last, be unapologetic about it. Don't apologize about having to take this tough conversation. Just, hey, yeah, it's got to be done. Let's just do it. All right. And that's Mr. Rogers. If you don't know. Welcome to my neighborhood. All right, so that kind of wraps up the conversation piece, the 3 things. So be authentic, be direct, and be unapologetic about that. Next up, we'll talk about time management. One of the things that when you become a leader, you get more things assigned to you. At least that's what I found. The more that I show that we can do things successfully, the more things that come our way. So I love this quote by Robert Frost. By faithfully working 8 hours a day, you may eventually get to be the boss and work 12 hours a day. And that's kind of how it works, at least at first, until you learn to manage your time. So these are a couple of tips and tricks. Some I got from Randy Pausch. You guys familiar with Randy Pausch? He was the computer science professor that died of liver cancer, did the dream, what's it called? The last lecture, that's right. He also did a time management talk at the University of Virginia that's really good. But there he talked about delegation and batching. That when you delegate something, it's best to batch your delegations and not just give them one at a time. And I put this picture on there because I wouldn't do laundry one garment at a time, right? You would batch them all and put them all together. And the same thing, we're going to talk a little bit later in this presentation about distractions and how distractions can, basically ruin your day and cause, a lot of disruption in your time. But what you can do if you batch your delegations, let's say I need to get one of the guys on my team to do something. How annoying would it be for me to come to him at 9:30 and say, hey, I need you to do this by the end of the week, okay? And then I come back to him at 10:30 and say, hey, can you do this thing also by the end of the week? And then I come back to him at 1 and say, hey, can you do this thing by the end of the week? Wouldn't it be better if I just waited till 1 and said, hey, can you do these 3 things by the end of the week? And only interrupted him 1 time versus 3 times. So if you batch your delegations and maybe have certain times that you are going to go and talk to your team and delegate things, it will really help your team, to be more productive. And it'll help you too, because it wastes your time to have to go and communicate several different times when you can get it all done in one shot. How many people have heard of Parkinson's Law? Anybody? All right, Parkinson's Law says that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. We also call this scope creep. But basically, if we needed to build a new website and someone gave us 2 weeks to do it, how long do you think it will take? Probably 3 weeks, right? So a little bit longer than what they said. But at least 2 weeks. When you were in college and you had a paper to do and it was due next Friday, how long did it take? It took you until next Friday, right? However, if you had the same amount of work to do and they told you that it was due tomorrow, magically you would get it done tomorrow, right? And the idea is that in our heads, if it takes longer, we have a longer time period, we assume it's more complex than it really is. And we spend more time thinking about it, more time second guessing ourselves, versus just focusing on what needs to be done and driving what needs to be done. So what I do is I use Parkinson's Law to my advantage, and I give myself fake, shorter deadlines than what I really need. And that helps me focus on, if I'm really going to get this done by Friday, then I can't worry about all the little what ifs. I need to focus on what's important and get that part done first. So giving yourself shorter timelines will actually let you accomplish more. Along with that, you can add on Pareto's law, which is the 80-20 rule, which I'm sure you've all heard of. The fact that if you focus on the 20% that gives you the 80% of the results that you're looking for, you can accomplish more. Which basically means that you have to stop doing that 80%. The 80% that doesn't give you as much. You need to kind of cut that out, or at least eliminate how much time you spend on it. Instead of spending 80% of your time on that, cut that back. So, if you look at it, if you analyze all your tasks and the things you do and the results of what you do, and you find the 20% that's going to give you the 80% of your output, and you double that by just doing 40% of your time, you're going to get 160. That's just, high school math. Not good math, public school math, but still math. All right, so that's Pareto's law. And this is probably my favorite quote of all time, is busyness is a form of laziness. And I suffer from this all the time. We all have something important to do when we get to work. We know about it ahead of time. You know you have something important, whether it's an important conversation, an important phone call, important task, something you have to check in that's going live, and it's usually something you don't want to do. For me, it's budgets. I hate doing budgets. I hate doing invoices. I hate all that stuff. Anything with money, I hate doing it. But I know I have to do it. And what I do is I get to work, and I immediately open up my email, and I see all the things that come in. I say, oh, that's important, and I get distracted. And I go and do that important thing that I saw in my email. And I get really busy with all the things, and I put off the important thing that I need to do that I really don't want to do. Right? And what that is I'm creating busy work, creating busyness that isn't as important, instead of doing the thing that's important and then delay the busyness. So with that being said, busyness is a form of laziness, and it's all created by distractions. So what I've found is if I come into work and I don't open Outlook, and I don't check my email, and I do that important thing first, and then it usually doesn't take that long. It takes me maybe 30, 45 minutes to do the budgets and stuff like that when I have to do them. So if I do that, taking care of it, I'm done at 9:30, then I can open my email and get distracted. And I did the important thing. And I feel good about myself. I feel good all day. So that's another thing you can do when it comes to time management. And I highly recommend you letting your people kind of do the same thing if you're managing a team. Distractions. I talked about how the email distracts me. That's one of the things we do in IT is we develop things that distract people. And we develop push notifications. Gosh, it's like the worst thing ever because now every time my phone buzzes, I have to look, oh, it's Word with Friends. Oh, it's Twitter. Whatever it is, I get distracted all day long now. And it's my fault, I know it. But distraction kills productivity because I may be in the middle of something and I get distracted and I look away and I come back and I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking about. And maybe it's lack of sleep, I don't know. But distraction and addiction to distraction is what kills productivity. And I have a couple of ways that we're going to talk about to get past distraction, but one of the things that's really easy to do is to use your best hours to do your best work. We all have times that we function better. For me, it's like between 8 and 11, before lunch. After I eat lunch, I'm done. My day's over. My mind is shot. I'm tired of thinking about what I just ate and that I shouldn't have eaten it. And I'm done. So my best hours are in the morning. So I try to book as much as I can in the mornings to get that done first, and then do all my meetings in the afternoon so that who really pays attention to meetings anyway. And one of the studies shows that 5 minutes of distraction can take up to 20 minutes of time to recover. And it really depends on what I'm working on, who the person is, and what the distraction is. Because sometimes I get distracted and I'm like, holy crap, I can't believe that just happened. And I think about the distraction for way longer than 20 minutes. And other times I don't think about it at all and I go right back to where I was. But some things that distractions do. Distractions snatch ideas. And I'm willing to bet that you guys are going to walk out of here and you're going to get distracted and some of these ideas that you had in here are going to be snatched just like that. And I can't think, and I'm sure you guys have too, come up with billion-dollar app ideas and then all of a sudden you forgot them because you were distracted about the Words with Friends that your friend played and they got 140 points and you can't believe it. So you just got totally distracted and you lost that billion-dollar idea and you'll never get it back. So they snatch ideas. They choke productivity. So by that, we talked about the 5 minutes distraction causing 20 minutes of productivity loss. They stifle creativity. There's so many things that you get distracted and you forget where you are and you just kind of rush to get things done, and you're not as creative when you're distracted. Everybody knows that. If you want to write, what do writers go? They go away and they lock themselves up and they get creative. They're not as distracted. At least a poor code quality. Back when I actually used to write code before I got into management, and I don't get to write as much, I've had several times where I would write like a class and then I'd go around and leave, get distracted, and I'll come back and I'll write the exact same thing, so I forgot where I was. And it's just, I already did that. I already had that function somewhere else, and why did I redo it? Because I was distracted. And they sabotage important tasks. I talked about the emails. Open up the Outlook in the morning. I know I've got something important I need to do today, but all these distractions that are coming in my inbox are sabotaging my important tasks. So how do I deal with it? Well, during my times of creative genius, which are far and few between, I turn off my instant messenger. Go to do not disturb. I'll take my phone off the hook, which my ringer's already off anyway. I don't answer my phone. But I'll take instant messenger off. Sometimes I'll book meetings in a conference room with just me in the conference room. And I'll go in there and I'll shut the door. And I give the meetings really cool titles too. Things like PCI compliance review, or something like that, or security audit. And it's things that are just really cool that really, I have nothing to do with that. But I'll just go in the room, and that way somebody looks at my calendar like, oh, he's in a big time meeting. And in reality, I'm just in the conference room because I'm trying to get away from distractions. And then the last thing, and I haven't really implemented this a whole lot, but I think it's very fascinating, is the Pomodoro technique. Does anybody use that? Yeah, how does it work?
I think it works really well, actually.
Yeah.
But what I was just thinking about this Pomodoro technique, I think it's kind of interesting with that compared to your previous slide, because it has a built-in 5-minute distraction.
It does, and the thing is that 5-minute distraction comes at a break, right? It doesn't come in the middle. You plan for it. Because you have 25 minutes of intense, focused work and 5 minutes of distractions. So during that time, you turn off Outlook, you turn off Instant Messenger, you take your phone off, and you focus for 25 minutes while the kitchen timer's going. And when it buzzes, that's your time to take a break. You have 5 minutes of catching up time. Whereas, that's the time you check your Twitter, you check your emails and things like that. But if you left your emails open all day long, what would you do? You would check it all day long, versus in that 5 minutes. Some of the research I've seen about the Pomodoro technique is that during that 25 minutes of focused productivity, you can usually accomplish more than you can in an hour of non-focused productivity. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Yeah, it's a great technique. I think it's fantastic, and it's a great way to deal with distractions, because you're not letting the distraction rule you. You're kind of ruling the distraction at that point. You're scheduling it. The next thing that happens that's somewhat related to distractions is procrastination. And as a leader, we get procrastinated sometimes. And the way to beat procrastination, I had some other stuff in here, and I decided that it wasn't appropriate, so I took it out. But you have to force yourself just to do things sometimes. The timing is never right. Although the street lights are never always going to be green, it's never going to always be the perfect scenario for you to go and do what you need to do to start leading or to have that tough conversation or anything like that. Stop procrastinating about it and just go ahead and do it. I put tweeting on here, and I got a story behind that. So this past year, I challenged my team to run a half marathon with me. And we did it, but one of the guys came to me right after we did the challenge, and it's a couple weeks later, he's like, man, I just keep, I'm not running, I'm not doing it, I just keep not doing it. He's like, how do I get motivated to do it? It's like, put it on Facebook or Twitter. Tell people that you're going to do it. Then you have to do it, because you put it out there. You can't not do it now. So he did. He put it on Facebook that he was going to run a half marathon on this day, and sure enough, he completed it. So it's pretty awesome. But tweet it, That'll help you do it. If you don't want to do it, just say I'm going to do it, and you don't have to. The next thing that happens whenever you're in a leadership role or you decided to take leadership up seriously is you start getting a lot of pressure, because now you're the guy, right? You're the go-to person. So I've got a couple of techniques that I use to beat pressure. And the first thing that I do is I tell myself that I've been here before. And that is pressure right there. If you're on that boat and it's starting to sink, I'd be terrified. That's one of my fears, is drowning. But I tell myself that I've been here before and I've done this. Whether I've actually been in this scenario or something similar, you can usually relate and say, yeah, we've done this before. I think right now I'm kind of like the expert on talking about pressure, because I'm up here talking to all these people, and I kind of didn't expect this many people to come to a talk about leadership at a developers conference. But and also when you're teaching college, you're talking to the same kids over and over again, and a lot of times you use up all your jokes in the first week, so you get a lot of pressure to say something new and something entertaining. So I've been around pressure. So what I do is I tell myself that I've been here before. I've done this before. I've spoken before. If I'm working on an issue and let's say our website's down or something's going on, I've done this before. Maybe not this, but I've done something similar. And I've gotten through it, and our team's gotten through it. So I just continually tell myself that, hey, I've been here before. The next thing that I do is I tell myself that it's not that important. Just like the whole fear thing, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that important. Okay, so the website's down. What happens if I can't fix it? Somebody else will, right? What happens if I don't show up to this talk? Somebody else will. It's not that important. It's not life or death. We're not surgeons. That's important, right? What we do is not that important. We're not doing that. That is important. So just tell yourself that it's not that important, and that usually frees yourself to be able to focus and get it done. It gets you past that whole pressure. I used to think that I knew what pressure was until I had a kid, and then I realized that, oh my God, I had no idea. And now I think that, these things aren't that important. The kid's probably going to forget what I told him anyway. Ask me why the sky's blue. Well, it's because rainbow, threw up. But just realize it's not that important. The next thing that I do, that I think about, once I start calming down, is I start telling myself, which is it's kind of a lie, but I still tell myself anyway, is that I'm better under pressure. And I'm better under pressure. And the reason why is because pressure creates power. Anybody ever pressurized something before? Like use a pressure cooker and took the thing off, it explodes, right? Pressure creates power. And I have an example. Anybody know how these things work? Water gun? I do have water in there. They're by pressure. I pulled the little trigger. Sorry, I didn't mean to squirt it out back there. But they create pressure, right? And then if you have more power,
oh yeah,
more pressure creates more power. About to wet something. That's a lot more power, right? Because it's got a lot more pressure. One of the things I found at work, and I'm going to give a pretty specific example. I guess they call it selected. I call it tortured, and put on a Six Sigma project that we had to run to do some improvements at work. And the Six Sigma project came with a lot of pressure because we had to do regular updates and meetings with our CEO and our board of directors, and we had to update them on what we're doing, what we're accomplishing, what the numbers were, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars were we saving, and so on and so forth in this project. And it was a lot of pressure because we had tight deadlines and there was a lot of work to do. And it was the first time our company had ever done anything Six Sigma related. But with that came a lot of power. So with that, we got to be able to, when we needed something to be done, we could just drop the Six Sigma. Hey, yeah, this is a Six Sigma project. And then we get done. Because with the pressure came a lot of power. But also with that, can't forget Peter Parker's quote, with great power comes what?
Great responsibility.
That's right, great responsibility. So with great pressure comes great power, which comes with great responsibility. All right, the next thing I wanted to read a story, but I left my iPad over there, so I want to put the mic down. You guys familiar with Admiral Stockdale? Anybody read Good to Great by Jim Collins? Okay, there's one back there. All right, Good to Great is probably one of the best-selling leadership books of all time. However, I don't really like that book too much, honestly. I thought it was great until all the companies went bankrupt. But in that book, there's a really good story about Admiral Jim Stockdale. And I'm not going to read the background part, but basically Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. And he spent 8 years in a prison in Vietnam between 1965 and 1973. And during that time, he was kind of like the leader of the prisoners, right? He taught them ways to communicate with noises so that they knew what they were talking about without giving away, to the Vietnamese what was going on. He was tortured over 20 times, and at one point he even beat himself, kind of like went Fight Club on himself and bashed up his face. because they wanted to make a video that showed that the prisoners were well treated because they were torturing their legs. They were like cutting and beating their legs. So that they videotaped him, they would get their faces. But he beat up his face and he cut his face to show that his team, his people were getting hurt. But during that time, I just want to read an excerpt of Jim Collins when he's talking to us. So at this point, Jim Collins is reading Admiral Stockdale's book, and he's getting ready to interview them. So he says, "You can understand then my anticipation at the prospect of spending part of an afternoon with Stockdale. One of my students had written a paper on Stockdale who had happened to be a senior research fellow." Let me skip ahead. "So here I am, sitting in a warm, comfortable office, looking over the beautiful Stanford campus on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I'm getting depressed reading this book. And I know the end of the story. I know he gets out, reunites with his family, and becomes a national hero, and gets to spend the later years of his life studying philosophy. It feels depressing to me. How on earth did he deal with it when he was actually there and did not know the end of his story? I never lost faith in the end of the story," he said when I asked him. "I never doubted that not only would I get out, but also that I would prevail, and in the end, turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which in retrospect I would not trade." I didn't say anything for many minutes. We continued to walk slowly towards the faculty club, Stockdale limping and Ark swinging his stiff leg, which had never fully recovered from repeated torture. Finally, about 100 meters of silence, I asked, "Who didn't make it out?" "Oh, that's easy," he said. "The optimist." "The optimist? I don't understand," I said, now completely confused given what he just said 100 meters earlier. "Oh, the optimist. There were ones who said, 'Oh, we're going to get out by Christmas.' And Christmas would come, and Christmas would go. Then they would say, 'We're going to be out by Easter.' And Easter would come, and Easter would go. And then Thanksgiving. Then it would be Christmas again, and they died of a broken heart." With a long pause and more walking, then he turned to me and said, "This is a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be." To this day, I carry a mental image of Stockdale admonishing the optimist, saying, "We're not getting out by Christmas, deal with it." And what that tells us is that being a leader is not always about being optimist. It's not always about looking at the sunny side of things. It's understanding the reality of where we are and knowing where we can be. And that's what it's about being a leader. Now I have one more thing that I want to talk about, and that's a really good book that I hope everyone in here buys and reads. It's not mine. It's Notes to a Software Team Lead. Anybody read this before? All right. There's one quote in this book that says, "There are no experts, there's only us." And basically the idea behind this is, when it comes to being a software team leader and leading a bunch of developers, we're kind of going into something that's known, but it's still sort of unknown, because people change, people are different, software changes, technology changes, and we're moving at a pace that's really unsustainable. And there are no true experts when it comes to software leadership. There's only us. So don't be afraid to take leadership and take it to the next level and move ahead. Don't think that you're not good enough to do this because you're not an expert. Just understand that there are no experts. There's only us. This is a really good book that I highly recommend. He has lots of practical things that you can apply to your team. He talks about the importance of stand-up meetings, the importance of face-to-face contact, of code reviews, and good quality things that a software team leader should probably focus on and look into. And it's a really easy read too. He gives lots of good examples. And now, final thoughts. Your goal of a leader is to develop your team. It's to build people, to grow people. That's what you do. When somebody asks you what you do, your answer should be to grow people. That's the number one rule of a leader. That's what they should do. What I like to do is I like to think of my team, and you should probably like to think of your team too, like your family, and treat them as such. Don't give up on your family. You would never kick your kids out during hard times, right, or if they messed up. continue to treat your team the same way. All right, and last, here are a couple of references from the books that I used to make this talk. If you have any questions about them, feel free to talk to me afterwards or ask questions. And that's my book. It's a little cheesy HTML book, but it's free on Kindle for the conference if you guys want to go check it out. All right, any questions? All right, then we're done a little early.
Had one question?
Oh, yeah.
When you first made the move from, kind of hands-on coder every day to more of a leader, how did you deal with the fact that now you're not going to get to code as much, and where your career's taking you versus your technical ability?
I started doing it on the side. I started building mobile apps on the side, and I got several that I do with that. So I never really stopped. I just changed when I do it and kind of reprioritize. One of the hardest things that I had as being a developer and switching, and I didn't talk about this much here, was that I always felt like I could do something better than other people. Or it really wasn't better, it was just different. I would do it differently. So when I delegated to someone else and they did it differently than me, I was like, why did I do it that way? Gosh, I would have done it this way. It was really frustrating for me to step back and say, their way is just as good as mine, it's just different. And to understand that, and especially with development, because everybody has their style, it's a little bit different than someone else's. And a lot of times I also was a very terrible estimator at first, because I always assumed that people would do things the way that I did and would be as fast as I thought. But I always forgot that people have other responsibilities too. I can't just say, hey, do this one thing, and okay, it would take me an hour, it's going to take this person, why is it taking them 3 hours? Oh, because they also have helped us to do. They have tickets they need to look at, and things like that made it difficult for me. Any other questions? Yeah?
Will these slides be available?
Yeah, I want to put these on SlideShare, and I'll tweet them out before the end of the day. And I'll hashtag DevLink, so if you're checking that out, it'll show up there. Anybody have any other questions? All right, hope you enjoyed it. I do have another talk that's tomorrow. It got moved from Friday to tomorrow at 4. I don't know where, you have to check it out online or on the little board out there. All right, thanks a lot, guys.